Uh, yeah.
It's just a way to boost.
Well, we'll send out vaccines to frickin' people, but yeah, let's just talk. Good morning. Can we make our way to our tables? We're going to get started in just a second. Well, good morning. Thanks for coming to the May 3rd meeting of the North County Estate Planning Council, San Diego. Thrilled that you all could be here. Kind of a gray day this morning, but if it turns into some rain, I think we certainly all need it. We're thrilled to have you here for another of our Planning for Real Estate Family series. It's going to be dealing with legacy real estate and its transitions. We'll cover a little bit more on that later. Thrilled to everybody that can make it in person. It certainly is great to have you here for certainly the education side of things, but more importantly, I think being here in person, it really makes it a much greater opportunity to meet people and develop relationships for future referrals. So thank you all for coming. I know looking around the room, it seems like it's Old Home Week. A few announcements before we dive in. Certainly for all of you that work with other estate planning, charitable planning professionals, certainly invite them to these meetings. It makes it more powerful. Obviously in the old days, pre-COVID, we'd have this whole room here with 130 people. So we'd love to get back there. It just makes it more powerful of a session. Without any further ado, though, I do want to bring up our sponsor for today's meeting, Ron Greenwald and Patty Gerke of Compass Real Estate. Ron?
Please, no, don't do that. Well, thank you for having me. I do appreciate the larger audience today, and I do hope to see that pre-COVID 150 people, and I do. Bill did an amazing job and continues to do that amazing job. My name is Ron Greenwald, and my business partner is Patty Gerke. A couple of other networking opportunities that Greenwald Gerke is sponsoring on the 11th of May, the North County Bar Association is hosting a networking event at the beautiful new Santa Ana Senior Living Community. If you haven't been there on Faraday, it's quite the cruise ship and dry dock. So it's free events at North County Bar Association's Estates and Trust Division. Also on Thursday, the 12th, Greenwald and Gerke is sponsoring the Rady Children's Hospital Symposium. If anybody would like to attend that event, please give me a call. I do have tickets available. So what is Greenwald Gerke Real Estate? We are a residential real estate team, and we are approaching our 500th, if that's a word, transaction related to estates, probates, trust, and right sizing, closing our close to 500 transactions. We will, a lot of times after estate administration, they don't have the liquidity. We will front the cash to get the home ready for sale, whatever that may be. And then we'll just get reimbursed at the close of escrow, no interest charge, no up charges to whatever we do to get the home ready for sale. We project manage everything. You give us the estate, give us the keys. We will arrange for the estate sale, the distribution of the personal property, get the home ready for sale, whatever that may need to happen. We will project manage it and timeline it, obviously under the control of the trustee. Communications, this is really key. Having done so many transactions, we stopped putting a lot of things into emails. We will pick up the phone and call you. We know what to say to the attorney and what not to say, and we know how to keep those beneficiaries far away from meddling. And top dollar, not one size fits all when you're selling real estate. So we have various strategic planning to how do we get top dollar for the sale of the real estate and through negotiations. So through that, we have the field of life, and that's what's on the board right now. And it's kind of hard to angle it this way. But who owns the team? The team owner is your client, the successor trustee or the trustee of their estate. We put the general manager as the estate planning attorney. We want them to be the general manager of the team. Then I know we have a professional fiduciary in the audience, and we like them to be the coach of the team. And then the CPAs, I know we have some CPAs in the crowd. How many have called their clients in the past year and done an estimated capital gains tax on the sale of their personal home? We know homes have gone up about 100% in the last 2 to 3 years. Even if it's a date of death from 2 years ago, I can get you a net sheet from escrow, happy to do that. And then you can calculate what might be the capital gains impact of them selling their home. Wealth managers. Anybody know about the new senior community being built on Nobel, Belmont Village, UTC, La Jolla? The top floor penthouse of that senior living community will go for $17,000 a month. Will their money outlast them? The average age of living in a senior community, if you need some assistance, is around $8,000 to $12,000 a month after tax. Then you'll see over on the left, far left, see that's kind of our field. The left side there, you have the bleachers. Where do we want the children and the grandchildren? As far away as possible. Then we have the visitors dugout. The visitors dugout is the senior living communities. Over the past 4 months, Patty and I and our team has literally visited every senior community and visited every executive director and every marketing director here in San Diego, because guess what's happening? Who's approaching 80 years of age? The baby boomers. What is the average age of a move into a senior community? Independent is late 70s, assisted living is early 80s. So you have a huge client base that's approaching that phase of life. They're going to want to do something. So I invite you, if you do want to go visit a community or have a client that may be interested in at least touring to know what's out there, give us a call. They provide great lunch. They'll always give you a free lunch at a senior community. They'll give you a tour, give you a free lunch. They have 5-star chefs. Enjoy it. And mindset your clients that this is a cruise ship and dry. I'm not saying they're going to do it today. They may do it in 10 years from now. But when they fall and they go into a SNF and they can't go back home, what are they going to do? Their crazy children come out all freaked out, and we don't know what to do with mom. Oh, we'll just place her here. But if mom had the idea of, I want to go to Belmont, I want to go to Oakmont, I want to go to wherever, it's a lot easier situation. So that's the field of life. And then on the left field, we have what we call the aging in place group. Patty and I, at no cost or no hourly fee, will certainly help people age in place if that's what they so desire. And we know about 95% of the population wishes to age in place. We have the contract. We don't do obviously the physical work, but we know all the people to come in and maybe just remove that area rug, or maybe redo the levers on the handles so that it's not arthritis kicks in. They're doing levers instead of handles, things like that. So if you have a client that would like to age in place safely and sanely, give us a call. We'll refer you to some contractors who can do that work. So more, I don't know how many estate planning attorneys we have in the audience today, but I'm going to propose today, the last thing I want to talk about is proposing a new revenue stream for estate planning attorneys, because this is where I go. Patty and I have literally walked into 1,000 homes, walked out of that home and go, how did this happen? Who let it happen? And why are these people living in such squalor in Rancho Santa Fe, Solana Beach, Del Mar, all throughout San Diego? It is appalling how people are living as they age because they just can't deal. And you can attest to that, how they can't deal with the aging situation. So I'm asking you, as they dust off their estate plan, their will, their trust, their healthcare directives, is to say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we're also going to add a best quality of life directive. Because what you're going to do is you're going to team you're going to team with an aging life specialist, a care manager, and we have one in the room today you can talk to afterwards, about doing a twice-a-year assessment of the people living in that home. And you're going to charge them for it. Because why? When somebody comes to your office, they can fake it. They can pretend they are just perfectly healthy, doing fantastic for 2 hours. They can do that when they go to the doctor. But if you send the care manager to their home for 8 hours that day, twice a year, that person can't fake it for the whole day. And that way you will get an assessment every 6 months. Besides the documents, you will also have an assessment of how that person may be doing. And I ask you just to think about it. I don't know all the logistics of it. I'm not the business planner on that side of it, but I think it's a business model where you say, I'm going to charge you $4,000 or $5,000 for the year to get 2 assessments a year from a care manager to understand your real health needs. I'm asking the estate planning attorneys, the wealth managers, the CPAs to think about that, because we have to get into that home earlier than later. Because again, I just don't want to walk into these people's homes, literally Rancho Santa Fe, Del Mar, Solana Beach, rats, mold, mildew. You would not believe what we see, hoarding, everything. So that's my little pitch on that. Do a home inspection, do a care management, but make it part of your business model, not part of the after business model where now I have to come in and do all the cleanup. Again, that's my high horse presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to think about it. Ron Greenwald, Gerke, we'd love to talk to you more about that idea. Thanks. Bye.
Ron and Patty, thank you so very much. Their contact information is in the meeting announcements. Certainly catch up with them, and obviously great services that they provide to our typical clients. One quick point as to our June 7th meeting, we have Wendy Goff, who's with Stoll Reeves in Seattle, a good friend of mine, who has a passion for dealing with drafting for mental health and addiction beneficiaries. And her talk is going to be entitled "The Challenges of Planning for Beneficiaries with Addiction and Mental Health Issues." She's an ACTEC fellow. She's spoken a number of different times through the Lineberg Services website on this very topic. So she's not to be missed. Clearly, she's on top of it because it's the real world that we all face with our clients and families and such. And I know she'll do a great job on that presentation. Future meetings in July, we have Pete Tentler talking about reverse mortgages along with Paul Hines. Pete is, of course, our chief networker, board member, but an absolute marvel in the scheme of dealing with reverse mortgages. Many solutions that he can come up with that I think still surprise me and would surprise you with what the solutions of the reverse mortgage can deal with. August, we've got Phil Sullivan and Jeremy Crickard, both now of Sullivan, McKibbins and Associates, who are going to be talking about planning for taxable estates from the $30 million mark to the $100 million mark. And this is areas that they've been dealing with quite extensively in the last couple of years, with particularly the potential tax law changes that might have been coming from Biden, as well as the expiration of the Trump tax cuts that's going to happen at December 31, 2025. Just fine tuning the September meeting. And then in October 4th, we've got Stacy Aldred of First Republic Bank, and who's a national thought leader on family dynamics, family governance, family business succession planning, preparing the family for the wealth. So quite a treat to have her. Certainly refer you to the meeting announcement as to all that we have going on due to David Jacobs on our website. He's a marvel at keeping that and ever improving it. So certainly go through there. For all the members, be sure to go and update your profiles. And then I want to bring up Pete Tentler to talk about our networking situation that we have here with our trifectas.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to see everybody back again. We've been meeting now back about 6 months now, since December, and a little longer? October, so longer than that. Special welcome to those who are visiting us for the first time. Prior to COVID, this room would be double, right? I mean, we would have almost 100 people in attendance. So what we were doing, what we couldn't do during the Zoom was our trifecta that the board and I came up with. And put your business card in this glass. And what I'll do is I'll pair you up with somebody that is going to complement you in your industry. And you get together for coffee, breakfast, lunch, and just talk about business, talk about some things personal. Every month there's something unique that comes up about it. This morning, somebody said, I had a marketing dilemma. And I talked to these other two people that in our trifecta, and they came up with this excellent solution. And now my business is really taken off. So the trifecta can be something personal, can business-wise. Please don't solicit. Don't put us on your mailing list right away. Just make this personal. So I'm going to pass this glass around and put it around the room. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Pete. The networking piece that, and Pete is certainly a master networker, but the trifectas is really a nice way to get together. Our networking time here at the council from 7 to 7:35 is still fairly short, but getting together with three or four other people, not in your same industry, but getting to know them, developing relationships, kind of more focusing on, what are you working on today that gives everybody an idea of what a person's up to and how they might be able to help and provide solutions to your clients. Without any further ado, I want to bring up Robert Vallera, Michele Vives, and Tim Meissner. As they make their way up, I want to introduce you to Robert. He's a partner in Voit Real Estate Services, Senior Vice President. His one designation amongst others is CCIM. He can tell you more about what that stands for. He's worked in the real estate industry for many years. Since 1981, he has taken a long view working on establishing long-term relationships with investors whose interests that he can certainly help and expand upon. He has a specialized knowledge in brokerage of apartments and multifamily development sites since obtaining his broker license in 1984. I'm going to shortcut that and let Robert add a little bit more, and he can introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. I think that was a very suitable introduction. And I'll, at this point, get into the introduction of our speakers. Very fortunate to have with us Michele Vives. Michele is the president of the Douglas Wilson Company. And as I describe Michelle's background and our other speaker, Tim Meissner, as well, I want you to listen to the variety, the breadth of expertise that they have, because this is something that sets them apart from a lot of other people in the real estate industry. So Michele is a principal real estate developer and provider of specialized real estate services, including advisory, fiduciary, and brokerage services. As an owner's representative and advisor, Michele often guides families and other entities in managing and optimizing their legacy real estate portfolios. Clients look to Michele for her confidential, strategic counsel towards the advancement of real estate projects and assets. Her expertise is in asset management, project feasibility analysis and due diligence, highest and best use analysis, land procurement, community outreach, entitlement processing, and contract negotiations. We're also grateful to have with us Tim Meissner. Tim is the founder and chief executive officer of Meissner Commercial Real Estate Services. Tim has over 40 years of experience in commercial real estate operations, including advisory services, asset management, acquisition, disposition, finance, leasing, construction, and property management. His career path has been focused on commercial real estate transactions and the formation of Meissner Commercial Real Estate Services as an operating business that manages a client portfolio valued in excess of $1 billion. Tim's primary functions are business growth and development, as well as mentoring the firm's senior management team. Tim's analytical focus and results-driven personality enable his clients to trust him with their commercial real estate investments. Tim has a reputation of high integrity and performance within the real estate community. And both of these people who have brains that are never off, I can assure you of that. Okay. So I was talking about that breadth of experience that they bring to the table. And that's different from a lot of people in real estate. Like myself, when I went into real estate brokerage, I was told, Robert, there's this much out there that you can do. You need to narrow it down to this. So I specialize in apartments and sale of multifamily development sites. I'm not a developer. I'm not a property manager. Yeah. Our two speakers today have that real breadth. But I think it's important that all of us understand what Tim and Michele do. They're not glorified real estate appraisers. They're not narrow development consultants. So I want to ask both of you, initially when people, how do you get an entree typically into working with a prospective client? Where does that come from? What kind of issues are causing people to call you?
Is this on? It's on. Okay. So I guess I'll talk a little bit and then Michele, you can answer that question. I'm going to stand up because I feel like I'm in a hole. So for us broadly in the marketplace, we're considered a real estate operator. I'm supposed to stand in front of the. Okay. Okay. That's great.
Let's go ahead and click to the next slide.
So we're
The next one.
we're considered a real estate operator. We're in the segments of office, industrial, retail, and clients will come to us really looking for asset management services, handle transactional business, handle the future growth of the asset, and guide us in real estate ownership. And so it kind of begins operationally at ground level. And then as we get to know the clients, then it kind of migrates upstream into their strategy and into what we would call advisory type work. And so when they come to us, Robert, they're just saying, here's our family situation. We own these assets. What would you do with those assets? And then we've already reviewed the assets and we start describing, here's our thoughts on how it would operate, how we can improve it, or whatever the property issues are. And so it's kind of the basic elements of real estate, and then it progresses into our relationship with them, their trust in us, and where does the family want to go. So that's how it works on our side.
Thanks, Tim. So being with a background of land use development and principal development, meaning actually building buildings for a living, I'm kind of known in the San Diego area and throughout the Pacific Northwest, which is where we do a lot of our work, as a real estate advisor, owner's rep, because I have the experience in actually handling real estate from start to finish. To answer the question, really, where we get most of our clients come from either the wealth managers, the attorneys, the real estate transactional attorneys, or their accountants who recognize that the families that they're working with are in need of truly understanding their real estate portfolio. I'll kind of get into our process a little bit later in this discussion, but that's kind of where our background meets what the family needs might be and how we can move forward as their owner's representative or advisor.
Okay. And so I'm looking at the graphic that we've got there, and it shows a lot of different team members. So I also see up there property manager, asset manager, and there's real estate economists or market analysts such as Gary London and Alan Nevin, who are well known around San Diego for doing this. So the work you're doing, how's your role different from those individuals, and in terms of how you interact with the family's other advisors as well?
I'll start this one first since we're on the discussion of real estate advisors. So versus a property manager, asset manager, market analyst in the real estate industry, as an advisor, I look at a portfolio or an asset in its totality and holistically, and how they work together to meet the short and long-term goals of the family. And in that process, as I kind of do a highest and best use analysis, teach them what they have in their real estate assets, I then look to property and asset managers as other keys, or even economists as other tools that I utilize to help round out the portfolio and actually implement whatever plan it is that our analysis has come up with the family. So those are the differences. And I think, Tim, you're going to talk a little bit more specifically about those differences. And then for us, we work with the wealth managers and the accountants and the legal team, because of course we need to make sure that anything that we are working towards in terms of an implementation plan or a long-term business plan is in line with tax situations, legal transactions, and meeting the revenue distribution goals of the family itself.
That was great. I agree with everything you were describing, and I'll just add a few more adds to the parts of it. This is a pretty cool graphic here. Well, I get this, I have to go lefty here. So it's this key here, that Michele and I are involved in fairly often, the real estate advisor, and that I guess role within the whole mix of advisors here, wealth managers, legal, insurance. It's really kind of a real estate CEO type thought process and leadership position. It's connected to the family governance. That's the family themselves and how they want to operate and make decisions. And then you drop to the asset management core, and we consider that really a lot of transactional business. The selling of an asset, the acquiring of an asset, the financing of an asset, the leasing or the construction. A lot of those things are housed, those skill sets are housed in that category of asset management. And property management, it's the category of the day-to-day operations, the monthly financial statement, the tenant calls, the vendor calls, the physical plant, caring for the physical plant. And so companies like Michele and ours, we're dwelling, across these spans, 1, 2, 3, 4. Michele's not so much in this side. We're heavy in this side. She's real heavy in this side, and we have, a third of our business in this, and then 10% of our business up here, and that's how it rolls out for us. But it kind of, structure. It's every piece of real estate's got its label. And those are the three main real estate labels for professional services.
Yeah. So to work effectively on behalf of your clients, in terms of your, I'm going to go ahead and speak hierarchically, in terms of your position relative to the asset manager, the property manager, to the extent that they have or real estate advisors, appraisers that they bring in, how do you need to be positioned?
I think if I understand the question correctly, you're talking about, so the real estate advisor kind of comes in and looks at the entire portfolio.
Mhm.
And for instance, we develop what I call a real estate planning book, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Then what happens is that real estate advisor is constantly in the oversight mode, where after developing the business plan and the implementation plan with the family, we then work with the asset managers and the property managers, and allow them to do their role,
Mhm.
but always keeping that entire team working towards the long-term plan that we've created. It's very easy in real estate to get diverted in different ways and lose sight of what that real estate plan and implementation plan looks like. And so we meet with the asset managers and property managers and make sure they're effectuating the plan correctly.
Mhm.
Because again, it's very easy to deviate from that.
Yeah, that's a great summary. And then I would say the role that Michelle's describing is really kind of one of a communicator. That's a huge part of our personalities and our skill sets, is listening to, whole circle of professionals and a whole circle of family members in a whole unique circumstance of a family that's evolved over 50, 60, 80 years. And then you're listening and you're suggesting and you're guiding, and it's this communicator role. And no matter where you are in this circle, somebody's got to have that communicator role for the real estate, because it's complicated. And when you find somebody, and it can come from any type of real estate organization, that's a key player in the family mix. And then the next thing that happens is that trust factor. The trustee has got to trust somebody. There's a lot of voices in the mix, and now it's turn right or turn left on multi-million-dollar decisions. So it's the trust. And that's why in our kind of business, our relationships are 10, 15, 20 years. It's the trust building over decisions year by year by year. And now there's a big decision. Are we going to split the family up? Are we going to go from one holding company family to 3 or 4? Big decisions. And so unless there's that trust and that knowledge among the family members to the real estate person, then, it's just much harder.
Yeah. How receptive do you find families? There's a lot of times as professionals, we see people who could use our expertise. They could greatly benefit far in excess of whatever would be charged in fees. But at times, they've got their heels dug in and they want to be independent. They don't want anyone to, they don't want to relinquish control. So how frequently do you find people are receptive to this?
Sure. Well, I'll stand up on this one. It's a unique question and situation. So I'll start almost at the beginning, which, let's say, is 3rd generation, and then I'll move up the ladder. So it kind of depends on where the family's sitting. 3rd generation, they know the real estate. They've had tremendous benefits. And now we're dealing with 3rd generation leader in the 70s or 80 of their family. And they're trying to bring along the 4th generation. And so our role, takes on kind of coaching and teaching and showing young people that are in their 30s and 40s how real estate operates. And so how receptive are they? Depends on their agenda, but usually 4th generation, pretty receptive. They're like, yeah, show me, because this is a huge cash cow. And how does it work? And how do I become the decision maker? Okay. Then we go to a 2nd generation situation, and they're, first blood in with new money, and they may be 10, 20 years into it, or just 2 years into it, and they're the kind of the real wild cards. They can say, let's just liquidate. I'm not up for this, it's too much work, or I like it and I have interest, and so that, varies back and forth. So receptivity is, unique there. It's the patriarchs. Those are the cool dudes, or ladies they're real visionary. They know exactly what they want, and they're going to tell you where they're going. and they're going to tell you what's going to happen when they're dead. And, it's so fun. I call it my 80 and 90-year-old business people. They're like, their net worth may be 200 million, and they're happy to rocket hard against the billionaire, corporate tenants. And so with them, we just help them. We help them, and then at some point they pass, and now we're dealing with the second generation that says, yeah, well, let's follow his lead or her lead, or let's change direction. And so receptivity it's all over the board. And that's really the fun part about what Michele and I get to do, is ride that wave. It's a wave.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. It is kind of all over the board at times. I have learned over the years of doing this kind of work that they're trusted advisors, the family's trusted advisors, like the people in this room, are integral to understanding and explaining to the family why this is a good tool. And so without you guys, I actually can't really get to the families all that much at times. And then I know what I really enjoy about it is that it does take some explanation to understand what it is you're going to gain from having someone as a third party look at your real estate portfolio and to help you understand what it can and cannot do for you and where you might actually find obstacles in the future. Real estate changes, it's market driven. There's a lot of land use code that also changes along the way that people need to be aware of when that happens. I recently had a hotel, it's a family owned business, it's a hotel in Mission Valley, where the Mission Valley Community Plan update was happening, and it was changing the zone, the land use zone of the hotel itself. And as we were going through the process and monitoring that plan for the client and the family, we were able to get them an upzoning that maximized the value of their land, where now it doesn't have to stay a hotel in perpetuity as it was before, but it can go to a mixed use land zone, and it almost doubled the land value. Because hotels today don't have the same land value as multifamily. So those are the kinds of things that you have to think about way in ahead and understand what's happening with your portfolio. Because even something like the land use code can change without your knowledge, and you need to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's a good example of where you're able to add value as a team leader. Tim, any thoughts there in terms of where you've been able to family situations that you've encountered where you've been able to add value for them as a team leader?
Sure. So with families that are thinking ahead, and one particular case, the patriarch himself is second generation, handing down in his 90s to his children who are in their 60s, a group of assets. And the children are spread out in different cities. The real estate's in San Diego. And the two family members that got one of the major assets, let's say a 250,000 foot multi-tenant business park, are located in Chicago. So they go through all the legal work to transition ownership to the two families. From one family to two families, the two families are located in Chicago. They're sitting on this asset and they're like, wow, fantastic. Now we control that cash flow. It's coming off at about 2 million a year. And, what do we do with it? We live in Chicago. Why don't we sell it and, buy more industrial in Chicago? That's the mother lode of industrial out there. And so we say, sure, well, let's, work with this asset. Let's spend a couple of years getting settled on what it is and how it works. And you kind of click into that, coaching the second generation, coaching the third generation, how it all works. And as we all know, in the last 4 years, the industrial market in San Diego has literally gone through the roof. And as we're watching that occur, we're making half a dozen moves on this real estate to, pace with the market and to increase value and cash flow. And all of a sudden we look back over a short 3-year span and we're like, wow, we just increased the cash flow of this asset by $800,000. It went from 2 million to 2 million 8. You know, the appraisal value came in at 30 million when the transition happened, and now it's at 50 million, you know. And so they're like, wow, well, maybe we should not transfer it out of San Diego. This is looking pretty good. So these are the examples of how the real estate expert gets adopted into the family as some kind of service provider. And then as the services are provided and the expertise is delivering yield and distributions, then everybody's rising together, and now you're building trust, and now you're a great family friend.
Michele, you have a lot of development background. Are there particular real estate asset mixes or property conditions that you find where there's a kind of a common thread, where there's a need for your specialized expertise?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not so much the asset class itself, it's the fact that the asset hasn't been being paid attention to or being brought up to current market conditions or repositioned in any way. You know, a lot of folks, to your point, the Gen 2s, the Gen 3s are kind of just in that status quo. They're happy with it. They feel comfortable. It's giving a nice cash flow. They're able to give distributions to their family members, but it's the Gen 4 that looks at it and says, well, I can really do something with this. How can I change it? And so it's again, it's not multifamily, it's not commercial per se, as much as it's those assets that have just fallen to the wayside, and there's a value add opportunity there. And we see that a lot with families, because most families don't understand how to maintain their real estate, their leasing, any of those things. Do you agree?
Yeah. Well, and what strikes me is your first example of how zoning changes, like in Mission Valley. I mean, the real estate expertise to see what's happening in your community in the zoning section. I mean, that's incredible value that's being added that kind of just bubbles out of this working relationship. And so this, it generally happens across product types, is that they're comfortable, it's been a great win, and they're coasting, you know. And then, like any business, if you coast too long, you're just depleting, you know. And so that creates opportunities for the real estate brains, you know, when they enter into the circle, to then start, you know, uncovering these new opportunities on an old site. You know, it's pretty amazing.
And Tim and I, when we were all preparing for this, Tim and I were talking about, you know, you often find like leases that are just turning over year, and no one's paying attention to adjusting them to fair market value or the term of the lease itself. And they may have been written like 20 years ago, right? And people are just triggering these options and not paying attention. And so as advisors, in both of our practices, we analyze all of that and set the rule book that says, okay, remember, August 15th, you start talking to your tenant and you're going to change and renegotiate that. And this is how you're going to do it. And, you know, and we continue to push people to really think about all of the different dynamics of their assets.
Now, that reminds me of something that Tim, I think you mentioned to me several months ago about digging in, analyzing leases and finding, was it CAM chargebacks? You want to elaborate on that a little bit and explain that to our audience?
Well, that's a complicated little subject, but I'll pick up where Michele was saying that the leases are really valuable instruments, and there are a lot of old ones. And like shopping centers are a great example, where 40 years ago, Vaughn's got a 60-year lease on 100,000 foot space in the middle of a growing community, you know, and they've just locked it down, you know, flat rent for 40 years. And so when we see that, we're like, wow, okay, you know, the current generation is not going to benefit, but out there, and, you know, 10, 15 years from now, we have a major redevelopment, and so that would be an example of the one that Michelle pointed out. There's other nuances to these leases where how operating expenses are passed through. In our industry, you can convert an expense into a revenue. Okay, kind of counterintuitive. How could expense become a revenue? But if you flip a lease type from a gross lease to a net lease, all of a sudden, every dollar you spend on operating expenses is reimbursed by the tenant. And now it's what? Revenue. And what happens with revenue? You cap it, and so you got a multiple. It's like the best expense you could ever have because it's revenue going to be capitalized. So those are concepts that, it takes some time to explain to people. But, you start seeing it on a spreadsheet and it's a lot easier to grasp.
And to add to that, as a really interesting example, we were working for a family in West Hollywood who owned an event venue that we ultimately sold for them, but they knew nothing about event venues. And then they had a lessee who was just the operator of the venue. So would throw concerts, everything. Well, they never really paid attention to the asset and they just kind of let the lease go. And as we were analyzing the asset, we found out that this lessee had put massive billboards on the property, went out, got the billboards permitted, the whole thing, but wasn't doing any revenue share with the owners. And they were literally leaving $500,000 on the table because they had not paid attention to the asset. And how would they have known if they hadn't hired us to go and look and understand what's happening on that site? And so, I mean, that's a perfect example of this idea of like, you really have to know your assets,
Well, that tenant just loved you.
Yeah, right.
But that's not who she's working for, right, folks?
That's a great story. That's a beautiful story. There's another similar, not as dynamic as that, but property taxes. A lot of these estate properties have been in their family for 20, 30, 40 years, and they have a tax basis that's just that old. So it's super low. Many of you know this from your homes. If you've been in your home for 30 years, it's get this minute tax value and you've got a, huge, property value. So in the industry, again, back to the leases, the net leases are the rage, every time you can do a net lease and you can have the tenants pay your operating expenses, well, you're miles ahead. Except in the case where you have an ultra low tax basis. And there, if you go net leases, you're giving away to your tenant your very low tax basis. So again, nuance to expertise, and you protect against that. You keep your low base, you don't pass it to your tenant, and you structure leases so that you can accomplish that. So lots of little nuggets that keep flowing through. Something as simple as, it's just a lease that's in the file, and that's the fun, detailed part of our work.
Okay. This next question is going to be a two-part question. We're getting into the family governance and vision section. So first part is, how commonly do you encounter subsequent generations who are prepared to continue the founder's role in running a real estate portfolio? And when that happens, what kind of work do you do for these well-trained and organized families?
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine very short because I got to tell you, in my entire advisory career, I've come across one family who had the real estate chops. So not many, because otherwise I don't think I'd have a job. So no, there's not many that actually have the chops, because usually it's the wealth creator that did. They understood all of the real estate, but they're not sharing that information as it trickles down to the Gen 3, Gen 4 that hire us. And when we do, like in the one situation that we had a very knowledgeable real estate person in the family, our role will still go through the process with them, but it really is to validate their long-term ideas, because within the family, there's a psychology about whether or not we can trust that one advisor, that trusted in-family advisor. And so our validation of them and saying, yes, that person has the chops, yes, they understand the plan, their recommendations are in line with what we would recommend. That's really how we work in that situation.
Okay.
So ours experience is a little different, and it's, and I've been thinking about this, getting ready for this meeting as to why this is, but a little bit relates to the big circle of all the different players. But when we're long-term people, operators with these families, 5, 10, 15 years. And so during that process, we're becoming friends and trusted people, in their lives. So it's a little different for us that whether one of the family members wants to step up and be a real estate operator, or whether they want us to be that operator, leaves a lot of margin for the family to continue with the legacy property. Now, we do have the occasions where the family, so it kind of links to how cohesive is a family. So in the not so cohesive families, it leads fairly quick to a disposition, so every family can kind of go their separate way. But where they like each other and they're cohesive, and the concept that together it's worth more than if we split it up, then we get into this receptivity of succession and younger generations learning. And it's cool because the younger generations may like each other better than their parents, and we got that going on in one of our families, and that the young new spokespeople are well liked by the whole crowd, whereas the old uncle or aunt is like, they're not invited, but they're handing it over to their kids, and their kids grew up as cousins together and they all like each other. And now they're ready, and they want good advice, and one or two of them want to step up and make the decisions. And now you have the situation. So it's for us, because we're coming from that management and asset management side, it gives us more flexibility. And we're also not, this piece of the business isn't really transactional for us, it's relationship for us. The transaction for us, Robert, is the negative thing. So in the brokerage side, it's all about transactions. Let's get them sold and get on with the next one. Ours is the reverse. The sale creates the loss of a client, or it could be the unique situation where we're taking that client, it's a sale, but we're now branching into, one asset becomes 2 more assets. But that's kind of advanced family legacy. It's usually not that interested. So because we're locked into these relationships and built these relationships, we're swimming in that pool a lot. But it's like in our company, $1 billion. We have like 100 clients, and literally there's only 10% of them that are operating in this kind of zone. That they're a cohesive family, and they have an awesome asset, and they want to pass it to their children. And that's a kind of a unique condition, and we try to gravitate towards those families.
Okay, thank you. So like a lot of investment advisors, you commonly face 2 types of variables. One set of variables are the real estate assets, and those can be really complicated. An even more complicated set of variables is the family members, right? And sometimes I imagine you have unrelated business partners that are in the mix as well. I'd like both of you to share examples of work you've done in forging successful long-term plans for families with their real estate assets.
Sure. I'm trying to think of so I'll use the same trying to go because there's this the event venue in West Hollywood. What was interesting about this event venue is that it was, even though one family had hired us to do their real estate advising for their entire portfolio, and this was just one piece of the portfolio, this piece had another family, cousins, that were in the deal as a tenancy in common. So to an unrelated business partner, essentially.
Mhm.
And there was arguments between those families on what they wanted to do with the assets. Working through everything that we found, adding value to the asset itself, and understanding how a tenancy in common works and the goals that each of these families had, they were separate goals. We were able to unwind the tenancy in common, add significant value to the event venue through the finding of revenues, et cetera, and decided to sell the event venue on behalf of the family.
Michelle, can I interrupt? When you say unwind the tenancy in common, can you describe what?
Yeah,
what's
so there's
involved in that?
provisions in a tenancy in common that I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to pretend to know everything about it because we had attorneys working with us to get this done correctly. That you have to unwind the tenancy in common, specifically if you want to do a 1031 exchange into another asset. So, but they didn't want to work together. They didn't want to be business partners anymore.
Okay, so this is in terms of title,
Yes. so
setting it up for a 1031 exchange?
Setting it up for a 1031 exchange.
Okay, so separating out the,
And
the
not
ownership
both
interests.
families wanted to do a 1031 exchange. So
Okay.
the family that I represented, excuse me, wanted to do a 1031 exchange. They wanted to diversify their portfolio with their net gain from the sale of the property so that they could maintain the real estate portfolio, but be in assets that they better understood,
And-
like office and retail.
and I'll quickly interject. In order to do a tax deferred exchange, when you move from one property into the replacement property, you have to do it under the same titling as you held the old property. And so in advance, well in advance of doing the transaction, you have to have that title work done and in place.
And unwound completely,
Yeah.
yeah. So the family we represented went in one direction, like I said, into a 1031 exchange on four different assets that they exchanged into with their net gain. And then the other one just liquidated.
Mhm.
So that's an example of how we kind of work through unwinding other unrelated business partners into a deal.
And then Michelle, the assets that they went into, are you involved on an advisory basis with those
Yeah,
going
so
forward?
we are. So we help them facilitate what those assets would be. We did an analysis for them of what their revenue yields would be based on
Mhm.
those. It was a 3 times revenue yield from what they were getting at the event venue. And then we meet with them, actually just met with them in early April, about once a year. They have a person on their team that really understands real estate now. But we met with them just recently, sat down for a few hours, walked through the entire portfolio again, and we
Mhm.
keep up in that way. Sometimes it's more frequent, other times it can just be once a year.
And I think, Michelle, that to me, Robert started off with the two parts, the real estate and the people. And that's the skill set you're describing is the people, the communicator, how do you communicate complicated facts, both, it could be legal, it could be title, it could be structural, it could be transactional, but communicating complicated facts in a friendly way that you get the trust and the buy-in of the participants. And that people side is the key to it all, and so, and that would be true if you're in legal or if you're in insurance, but it's very unique in real estate because there's all these different components, and we bump into those often. So for me, my example would be a family that a number of children, mostly, half of them disinterested, half of them interested. The real estate has to go through transition. It's uncompleted master plan, it's maybe only halfway through the master plan. So do you just sell it all now and walk away, or do you fulfill the master plan, which may take another, decade? Interested parties, non-interested parties within the family. There's in the will, a big donation chunk, this patriarch wanted to hand over half the estate to a nonprofit, and children get the other half of the estate. So that's strategy, communication, and pacing, and in the middle of that, you have enough cash or you don't have enough cash, and so these are the aspects that we're bouncing between the people side and the real estate side in finding the path. No, there is no right path, but there's a path that everybody says, yeah, let's follow that. And and that becomes the work.
Okay. So you've helped forge a consensus, created a plan. How does the plan get implemented? I know we need a team lead or a trustee. Tim, would you like to address the role of the team leader or the trustee?
Yeah. So this is, if it's commercial real estate of various forms, and that can expand into, hotels or all kinds of income earning assets. But it seems to work the best when the leadership group in the family and the attorneys and the insurance people, they let the real estate person be the leader of the real estate subjects. May not make decisions, but tee up the fact sets. And so that's, you have to have the personality types that want to rise up and make recommendations and lead the family in that real estate decision-making process. And all the examples that Michele has outlined, these are tricky, complicated things. And so you just have to, in her case, want to be out there in front, make the recommendation, be able to back up that decision, and time will tell whether you're still part of the team or not. Because if it goes well, you're on the team. If it doesn't go well, you're off. And not everybody likes that risk. But so that's my thought, is that you kind of have to take the real estate by the horns.
And how commonly do you encounter where there's a bias to turn to, say, the CPA to lead the real estate, and you're having to use your elbows a little bit to create some room for yourself there,
Okay,
to be
so
heard and to be able to do your job for the family?
yeah, to me that we can take certain. To me, it's the bias towards conservatism. So CPAs and attorneys often are very low risk takers. And so there's voices in these rooms of people that don't want any risk to people that will take certain risks. So again, it's discussion, and it's hard to argue against anything that's super conservative. And so this becomes a process of the aptitude or interest in risk taking, regardless of the discipline that they're coming from.
Michele, do you want to comment on that too? Do you find that you're at times, I don't know if butting heads is quite the right word, or in conflict with other advisors, such as an attorney or a CPA, who don't have the real estate expertise, and you're having to fight for your position?
Yeah, at times there are. This is where I'm just going to say, I think back to the communication point, one of the most important aspects of what I do with families and their advisors is to really teach real estate. So I become somewhat of an educator. I like to put things in more layman terms. I like to describe them pretty simply. Kind of the handbook that I put together is a real user-friendly handbook. And so I think by doing so, we kind of eliminate that conflict and butting heads a bit, because people start to understand why and why I'm suggesting the things I'm suggesting. Not everyone always takes the advice though. It's not that, I can say, hey, don't liquidate this asset. This asset in the long run is going to give you X, and they still want to liquidate the asset, right? And that's fine because it's their asset. But it's a matter of just really trying to teach as much as possible.
Okay. You mentioned that you have some real key reports and other tools that you use to help implement and monitor the plan. Do those help through the process? And also, could you describe those to us?
Yeah, they really do. And I'll give an example. This is an example. As you've noticed, neither one of us have been mentioning family names because the confidentiality aspect of this is really important, right? No one wants anyone to know what their assets are or how they deal with them. I fortunately have a client that I've been working with since 2015 who allows me to use their name. And so I'm going to use this as an example. And many of you who've heard me speak before know the client. So I do work for the Jacobs family, not Jacobs, Qualcomm Jacobs, but Jacobs Engineering. And Jacobs Engineering years ago bought 60 acres of land in Southeast San Diego. And in 2015, they came to us in a charitable aspect. In 2015, they came to us and they said, we have all this land. We've effectuated some development, but we don't know what to do with the rest of the land. And their whole goal was to sunset in 2025, develop out this kind of underserved community and give it back to the community. Really interesting charitable approach. In 2015, the first thing we did was create that plan. And that was a matter of looking at all 60 acres, understanding the land use, understanding its current value, understanding its projected value, giving ideas as to how we can create a master plan, to your point, that could be effectuated by the time that they sunset. We then went out and really physically created the master plan and showed what all the assets could look like. We got that approved by the city of San Diego as a master plan and entitlement project, so that over the decade of time, all of those different assets could either be built or repositioned. So they have a book, literally a book, that we wrote for them that is the business plan that they can check off along the way. Now, they've kept me as their advisor on board all the way since 2015. So I actually help implement the plan as well. So I stay to the schedule that we've created. And sometimes there's some movement in that schedule, specifically when we have things like a pandemic that changes how the assets are actually performing or working. But we are about finished. We're down to 1 7-acre parcel in terms of getting those 60 acres developed.
Okay, thank you. Sure, go ahead, Tim. Please do.
So that was a super great story. And that's, the complication of 60 acres and a master plan and a plan that's changing and multiple uses on site, all kinds of uses on that site. So on our side of the fence, it's a lot easier. On the stabilized asset side, office parks, industrial, retail. So on our side, our key tools are simple. There's always an annual budget for income, expense, and operating expense, capital, and then there's a 10-year financial plan. And when you lay out any kind of asset and spread it over 10 years, and you can see the vacancies coming, the capital required for roofs and for tenant improvements and for asphalt, and the only thing that the beneficiaries are looking at is what are the distributions, and so you lay out the distributions. Here's your good years, here's bad years, and or here's years where there's zero cash and we got to finance. So it's that kind of tool that then can really help a family decide what do they want to do and what are they in for. And then it can lead to, hey, you know what, the cash flow is nice, but let's all take a capital gain, And we had one come up just 2 years ago, and literally to just accelerate the simplicity of it all and let the three families take a piece of the pie and go their separate ways. they were happy to pay a $4 million prepayment penalty on a loan. So not something that we were recommending, but they were like, we like the cash. We want, each of them get, 8 million cash. That's a lot better to some people than taking annual distributions. And so something like a 10-year cash flow projection, starts to set into that logic. You compare cash flow to value, now that balance sheet is their balance sheet, and we're rolling with a $20 million paper net worth. And do we want to liquidate it or get a distribution? And so these are the things that a 10-year projection will help you decide, and the annual budgets, fold into that.
Yeah, thank you. Now, we started out the meeting this morning listening to Ron talk about what's happened with a lot of elderly people who, you mentioned Rancho Santa Fe, Del Mar, nice neighborhoods. They really had their act together at some point, but as the years have gone on, the situation's deteriorated. When I'm out there looking at real estate and getting financial statements, I'm finding about 50% of the time the owners are on top of it. About 50% of the time, there's a lot of value being left behind. And so, as you're out there talking with your clients, if they have real estate, and if you're seeing signs that they're no longer on their A game, be thinking of Tim and Michele and the value that they can come in and add, because it's amazing how much low-hanging fruit is out there for families if they can get someone to come in and take a comprehensive approach to their real estate and help improve the efficiencies. I'd like to open it up for questions at this time. We've got a wonderful presentation. Let's see if audience members have any easy questions, any hard questions. We're open for all of it, right? Okay.
Says, how does NNN lease pass income tax basis to the tenant?
Yeah. So repeat the
Oh,
question
can you
again.
repeat the question?
How does NNN lease pass income tax basis to the tenant? If you can repeat it for the live stream.
Okay, so NNN are triple nets, taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance. And so the tax piece is in a net lease, an NNN lease. The tenants pay all the operating expenses, including the property taxes. And so that's where a tenant then is taking receiving the obligation to pay a base amount of monthly rent, plus their share of the property tax bill, the insurance bill, and the operating expenses. I think that answers your question.
Yes.
Well, we're not licensed in any state. I mean, we have broker license for California, but to do the advisory work that Michelle's talking about, we can do that anywhere. Yeah.
Yes.
We get this question a lot because it always sounds like we're working on these massive things, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, we have worked with a family that owns a small infill multifamily, asset in downtown San Diego or by college, so it really doesn't matter the size. I just highly always recommend that people understand their real estate assets and how they work for them.
On our side of the fence, we can't get too small because it's funny. It's almost like, the 10% carries, 90% of the value. So the 10% is a lot of this high level recommendations. And generally people don't like to pay for that. They like to be, given that. And so the way we offset that is if we're getting enough of the asset management fees, the transactional fees, and the operating fees, then we can give free advice on the high end. So for us, if it's not a $10 million asset, we can't really get engaged. So.
Could you each speak for a moment just how you are handling families' expectations of this very hot, perhaps overvalued market, and the younger generation maybe looking to cash out, put money in the stock market, for example, versus keeping it in the family legacy business if it's not in the same asset? Are you finding clients willing to go to cash and then keep that cash parked for a future opportunity?
Yeah, so we do find clients willing to go to cash. But, you know, lately in the economy and our uncertainty in the economy today, the increase in inflation, we often talk to our clients about how real estate is really so well safeguarded. And if you're really looking at a long-term plan, you know, while there's a lot of wonderful liquidity and you can make a lot of money today, you're not going to, and if you're going to put it into stocks, you may not necessarily, you may lose in the end because we're just not sure where we are today. And we all know real estate doesn't get quite as, if you own it, isn't affected so much by inflation. Right now, of course, if you're buying today, you're kind of screwed, as we all know. Excuse my language, but yeah, that's kind of how we address it. And again, there's oftentimes that folks want to liquidate that we're like, you're not thinking of the long term, and they just see the dollar signs. And I understand that, and it's ultimately up to them. The most that we can do is just to give them the solid information and help forecast where the market's going.
Yeah, I agree. That's the wild card piece of it. But another example that we'll use in that decision-making process is you can really look at these kinds of real estate assets and describe them as a bond or a stock. So that the distribution to family members, we call it the dividend, okay? And then the appreciation that's occurring on that asset because of its location or quality is the stock rising. And very often you've got both happening at the same time. Cash is rising and capital value is rising. And so if you've got IBM stock, which, you know, is being, you know, I mean, so you can click it in, you can say, look at that market value, and it's to the market value, your dividend is running a 4% to market value. You know, wow, you know, and it's doesn't have the risk of the stock market, you know, and now you're getting a high-end dividend and you're getting appreciation. Now, if you want to liquidate that, that's your call, but this is how we see it.
And to add to that, because I think the important part of, well, one of the question you asked too is, how do we help people understand, you know, what they see the value rising, and so they want to liquidate. I also often explain cycles to people because they don't really understand how cycles work. And so to your point, looking at the big picture and showing them, well, this is where we were at this point in time, and then look at 9 years later or look at 13 years later and help them understand how real estate stays within cycles outside of the Great Recession of 2008. But you see, they start to see, oh, there is value to holding long-term on the real estate side.
You know, along those lines, I just had a client sell 14 units up in Normal Heights, 14-unit apartment building, 1980 some odd construction, $5.5 million. Now you see that going on and you sit there and say, okay, what does that tell me? And what's the $5.5 million really worth? And the only concrete answer I could come up with is 14 units in Normal Heights. Aside from that, because of the rapid inflation, I'm not real certain what that dollar's pegged to anymore. I think the printing press is in Washington. But you know, it goes to what, you know, Michele says, you know, maybe you don't want to get too excited about those dollars. And as Tim said, look at what income stream that can produce over the long haul. So, yeah. Michele, any final thoughts for our audience today?
Well, I want to thank everyone for listening to us talk. I hope you guys all found it interesting. Feel free to call me. I say this to people all the time, and I really want you to take me up on it. I'm not going to charge you for a conversation about your client's assets and whether or not they need our help. We do a lot of initial analysis just to see if there's a there, right? And so feel free to call, ask questions. I really enjoy what I do for a living, so it's enthusiastic. Like I'm very enthused about new projects and looking at different asset types and working with different families. It's really fun. I get to wear several different hats, so don't hesitate. And thank you again for listening to us today.
Yes, I concur. Thank you for your listening and your time. For us, it's a unique thing. We play on both sides of the spectrum, the very simplest, lowest end of the industry, the property management side, or the very, very high end, the advisory. And that allows us great access to clients. Hey, all we need is somebody that can simply manage our asset, somebody that can give us a financial statement on time, boom, the door opens for us. And then, the relationship begins. So regardless of simplicity, regardless of how simple their needs are, we could be a great add to their family. And it doesn't have to be, as Michele said, super big or super fancy. It's simple stuff. We start at the simple stuff level.
And Tim, I know we can't name any names today, but Tim goes from the simple level all the way up to probably the working with some of the most successful real estate families in San Diego County. So we appreciate your time today. Thanks, both of you. You want to final?
Well, that triggered me. So it's unique about our business. So we have this family tier. We also have professional investment companies. I mean, these guys rock, and they're just pros at it, and we just support them, buying and selling. And then there's City of San Diego and Port of San Diego and pension fund advisors. So we're like in this $1 billion club, and then we're in this $1 million club, everything up and down the rung. But what's happened over this 30 years is that these best practices are set up for the $1 billion club, and then it's pushing right on through to the $1 million club. And so it's a pretty good program.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Robert, Michele, Tim. Great presentation. Obviously, your experience and expertise came through loud and clear. So certainly do reach out to them if you have any questions or want to know more information. Their contact information is in the meeting announcements. Look forward to seeing you all next meeting, June 7th, with Wendy Goff, who's going to be dealing with the real world that we all experience with our families, the challenges of planning for beneficiaries with addiction and mental health issues. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.